After a disappointing start on the road, the Texans will start their home journey of 2025 against the Buccaneers in prime time on Monday Night Football. We're going to talk about all that and more on this edition of The Bullpen.
He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Turned down for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to The Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm ready to get on the winning column in 2025, 2026. I think this is going to be a really good game. Two pretty good teams, and just look forward to all the offense.
I'm ready to leave the past in the past. We're 0-0, starting over. I'm gonna forget about that L and try and move into the dub column this week on Monday Night Football against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers had a good showing against the Falcons, ended up winning 23-20. And one thing that stood out to me was the performance of Emeka Egbuka, who is a guy a lot of people wanted to see in a Texans uniform. So yeah, I'm excited to welcome them back. Last time they were here was a pretty big deal, a core memory, I think, for a lot of Texans fans. Beautiful game. So yeah, I'm excited to see it. Let's get into the individual matchups. We'll start with how Baker Mayfield matches up against this Texans defense. It's a guy who has rebuilt his career, returned to prominence after a brief down period. I bet the Browns are kind of wishing they had worked through that, but they're the Browns, so why would they? But now he's with the Buccaneers, following up Tom Brady with some pretty solid quarterback play. The kind of guy you don't want to look past, you don't want to look down on. I would expect he presents a challenge at least in some way. How do you feel about how Baker Mayfield matches up with this Texans defense?
I'm kind of like more concerned about Baker being a threat on the ground with his feet. We've seen it in the past. He tends to, get loose from time to time. Really good at extending plays to get guys open. So where Stafford, a little bit older, obviously with the back injury that he was dealing with, was a little bit more centralized. I think Baker presents a new challenge for this Texans front from the aspect of, all right, this is a more mobile quarterback. I do feel like the Texans front is probably their strongest position group on the entire team. And if anyone is looking forward to making a statement at home in a home opener, it's going to be them. So I'm looking forward to those guys really getting after Baker, making it really hard for him to find said stud young wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, mobile's the word. He's like he's able to get out there and make something work. So that's something the Texans have struggled with in the past. Where there's Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, those kind of quarterbacks have presented challenges. The only win I can remember, at least in recent memory against a more mobile quarterback is last year against the Bills was a game where they managed to maintain or contain that. But I think that a guy like that, if you look at his stats, 17 of 32, 167 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's not, burning it down in terms of yardage, but the targets that he does have, he's made count, by scoring. So it's tough to be, to not have at least a little bit of a concern with him. I think that his mobileness might actually, I don't want to say make him easier to get to, but with Stafford was so committed to staying in the pocket and staying within that protection that he would stand in and make the throws within a timely manner. Whereas I think maybe the Texans could find Baker Mayfield maybe hanging on to the ball a little longer because of his scrambler nature, and it could give them a more ample opportunity to get in there. Which, I mean, they did get 3 sacks on Stafford, so I could see that becoming a higher number. One threat that he does pose like as a mobile quarterback, he had 5 rushes for 39 yards, which is not bad at all. 7.8 yards per carry. He outshined Bucky Irving, and so let's talk about that. The Buccaneers have a running back room. It's Bucky Irving and Rashad White. Fantasy owners of Bucky Irving were a little let down week 1. Do we think they might be disappointed in week 2?
I mean, I hope so. Obviously, the Texans did a really good job with Kyron Williams. I mean, he did flash a couple times, but for the most part, I think they kept him in check. And, when you start to look at how important it is to stop the run, it makes the team one-dimensional. And I think with a team like Tampa, if you can get them to be one-dimensional, you can probably have a better chance at getting to Baker, just because he's going to have to hold the ball a little bit longer than he probably wants to. And it's going to be a little bit more predictable. So I'm really hoping that the Texans can contain Bucky Irving the same way that, they kept Kyron Williams in check. He only ran for 18 carries for 66 yards. And for me, you take that all day as a defense, 3.7, while a good number. I think most people expect guys like Bucky, guys like Kyron to get over the century mark and average a little bit more per carry. So I think the fear for me with Bucky is probably going to be as a receiving threat. The Texans don't necessarily handle running backs as receivers so well. Just have to see how it works out. But I'm hoping that he doesn't burn us too bad.
Yeah, and I mean, he had four targets. He had 4 receptions for 8 yards against the Falcons. So whatever the Falcons did seemed to work in holding him back in that way. But one thing I look at with this Texans defensive line is that Will Anderson Jr., as much as we would like to see him be the very best pass rusher in the entire NFL, one of his biggest strong suits is as a run defender. To add on top of that, the fact that Jalen Petrie will snip out the run from that star safety position, and it's a recipe for probably a pretty favorable outcome in that area. We already talked about Emeka Egbuka at the beginning. They've got Mike Evans, Sterling Shepard. It's a pretty well-rounded group. Do you think that maybe, like we talked about it with our recap of the Rams game, that the Texans might look to start shadowing a specific receiver, or do you think this is? I think this presents as a situation with Mike Evans and Egbuka, where we could see them continue to play guys on each half, because I don't know if there's a clear guy you want Stingley to be on the whole game. But I mean, what do you think?
No, I spoke to it last time. I really feel like this is a thing that's just their nature, their culture. The Texans don't like to shadow guys. I don't think they're going to start now. Mike Evans is a dude, a Galveston native. This is kind of a homecoming for him in prime time. I could see him having a lot of friends and family at the game. I could see him trying, to represent well for, his team. And I hope that means we see a lot of Derek Stingley Jr. on Mike Evans, because clearly of all the coverage guys the Texans have, I feel like Stingley presents the best chance to slow down Mike Evans, a little bit bigger corner. But I mean, if, Mike Evans ends up rolling over to Kamari Lassiter and I don't think the drop off is that huge between the two guys that he can't stay with him. It's just going to be interesting to see what Tampa does if they use what tape is out there from the Rams game to try to move Egbuka around, to try to get him in favorable matchups, in the slot, which seemed to work really good for Puka Nacua. If the Texans aren't careful, teams are going to start to pick up on, you can beat these guys this way, and just use it as a recipe for success. I'm hoping that the Texans make the adjustments so that Egbuka doesn't have a monster game.
Couldn't agree more. Shifting to the defensive side of the ball, the Texans will face a defense that wasn't necessarily able to stop them. I think that's why we saw the CJ only needs 46 seconds, like all that stuff from the last matchup. These are two very different teams now in 2025. But is there anything that sticks out to you about this Buccaneers defense that could pose a challenge for this Texans offense, as if they aren't already challenging themselves enough with discipline and penalties and such?
The big thing for me is that they're a very, very stout run defense. Atlanta, who's got two really good running backs, struggled to run the ball. They threw the ball well. They did not run the ball well. So for me, the Texans finding ways to run the football effectively against this defense is going to be everything. Because as we've seen, the Texans really want to be a run-first team so far in the season. I think until they get the new offense all the way, installed and they get CJ comfortable, I don't think they want to go crazy with, the amount of throws. Last time he only went out for 29 attempts. I think that's a number that they like. I don't think you see CJ get up over 30 if they can help it. That way they can stay really balanced. But I also feel like if the run game is just not getting it done, you're going to have to see CJ try to attack the secondary. And I hope that the balance is there, but I'm kind of seeing, where for them to be successful, they may have to throw the ball around the yard a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at the Bucs defensive line, Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey is a name that stuck out to me when he was drafted. These are guys that can be disruptive if you let them. And this is a Texans team that's facing a lot of shuffle on the offensive line. I'm interested to see how that pans out. With Jake Andrews due for an MRI, or he had an MRI on Monday at time of recording. We don't know the result of that. But looking at it, we could have a new center, new shuffle of the offensive line, depending on if Ed Ingram's healthy. It'll be interesting to see this group pretty much all season. I mean, I feel like until there's some stability. And so Nick Chubb put up 4.5 yards a carry. I liked what Dario Gambale was able to do on 2 carries. So I'd be interested to see if the Texans lean more on Dare in this game as the change of pace with what we've seen in this season so far, or if they continue to see if Dameon Pierce, obviously I would expect at some point they'll give Woody Marks some sort of share of the carries because he's a rookie and they want to see what he can do. But I'm interested to see how they divide up the run game going into this, especially since they reported going in last week that Nick Chubb was the guy, bell cow, going to get all the workhorse load, and it didn't really feel like that was the case. So interested to see if that changes much at all this week. Looking at CJ Stroud's challenges throwing the ball, I mean, once again, it's going to come down to now. One thing I don't think we talked about it. If I'm thinking back to things we didn't talk to on our recap of the Rams game, on top of discipline and penalties and such, CJ Stroud was under pressure for like a 40% pressure rate, but on those snaps, I believe he went like 9 for 10 throwing the ball, so he did pretty all right getting the ball out under that pressure. But as we know, watching CJ play, when he has the time, he can make it shake. And so I'm interested to see how much time CJ is getting and how he can distribute the ball if we can get some better opportunities. Looking at the wide receiver room, not a lot of opportunities for Nico Collins in the first game. Do you foresee any issues that he will face in terms of this defense that he's facing? Or are we kind of in the boat of like the scheme's going to have to fix itself to get him open?
I mean, that's definitely how I feel. I think when we look at Nico in the past, he's pretty matchup proof, as far as like guys being able to just take him out of the game. I don't think that there's one cornerback that I think about in the league that, is just going to completely shut Nico down. I believe he's that good. So for me, it's really about the offense scheming different ways to get him the football and just leaning into it. When you only throw at him for 5 targets, I I just think you talk a lot about the bell cow thing with Nick Chubb, and I kind of agree that he got the lion's share of the runs. To me, it's the fact that the ball got spread around in the pass game so much, where you didn't do the same thing with Nico Collins, and Nico Collins is your bell cow wide receiver. So the fact that he doesn't see at least 10 targets in a game, being wide receiver one unquestioned, is kind of like a failure on the offense's part. So I really feel like that fixes it. Just making a concerted effort to get Nico Collins the football is going to fix the issues that we have with Nico Collins' production.
I agree with you. And the only other thing I'll say about the Texans wide receivers and how they match up with Tampa is, and I think Big Sarge was the one who I saw make this observation, Christian Kirk returning, I think, could be massive in terms of how it affects, how the Buccaneers play against the Texans and how effective they are at getting Nico open. I think having that other more proven option on the field could stir things up a bit. But with that, let's get right into our score predictions. I think we're at a point this season where I'm interested to see. I think we're both going to take the Texans, but I'm not fully certain. At least I know I am. I'll get that out of the way right now. But Tom, how are you feeling about this game going into it?
I mean, I feel like home opener, prime time. You got a lot of guys that, didn't like the way last game ended. CJ in his post game talked about, we've got to practice better. I've got to take more accountability. I've got to be better. I've got to get my guys ready. I think they respond. I think those guys understand where they want to go. I think they understand the kind of team that they have. And I think you're going to get a better showing from this team than they got in LA. And for that, I feel like they're going to score more touchdowns. And I really feel like this defense, I've said it multiple times, you said it, this defense is elite. It's Super Bowl caliber. For me, if you told me how many teams in the season are going to score more than 21 points on the Houston Texans, I feel like I could count them on maybe one hand. So to me, if the Texans can score 21 points, they're going to win a lot of football games. So to get to my prediction, I feel like this is a game where I want to say it's going to be high scoring, but I don't think it is. I think the defense is going to shine, much like they did in LA. To me, I'm going 23-7. Actually, you know what? I'll go 23-10. 23-10 is where I'm at. I really feel like the Texans are going to do what they need to do to put enough points on the board to where it's going to take, Baker to be kind of one-dimensional. And I foresee the defense just having a really good night.
Well, I am going to go a little different. I think 14 points for the Bucs is just, I think that can be the baseline for expectations for pretty much any team until we get, something different to work with. And I think that as much as we talk about the offense, there is still room for improvement on the defense. And so I think we can go with what they allowed in the last game and roll with that. If they had, only given up so much, or if they looked a lot better last week, I'd probably be in the same boat as you. But I'm gonna go with a 20-14 win for the Texans. As to the storybook ending, so it will be 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, 14-13. Buccaneers are winning, and CJ's gonna kind of start running a drive. The Texans offense, has scored a touchdown obviously to this point, but has just kind of been messing around, not really getting the job done too much. There's signs of life. A term I used this past week, I think it would mean more this week though. And we see the Texans start to move down the field. It gets close to the 2-minute warning. The 2-minute warning hits, and the next play, from like the 40-yard line. CJ throws a ball across the middle, and Higgins catches it. And Higgins it's beautifully designed, just goes all the way down the field and gets the touchdown. The Texans were already in field goal range, but he decides to go ahead and seal the deal. They only take the extra point. I would have thought they'd go for 2, but they decided to play it a little more conservatively. And then the defense locks it down. Not much resistance from the Buccaneers. And it's a Texans win. So here it is. I'll probably pick the Texans every week, except that I can think of a week or so where I might not, but we'll see. But I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see the Texans get out there and make the magic happen. Get to their first win to be 1-0, because we're not even thinking about week 1. It's already out of my mind. I am not having nightmares about it right now.
Well, I had to go look at stats for that Tampa Bay Falcons game. And unless you're going to tell me that the Falcons defense is better than the Texans defense, I feel really good about this game. I feel really good about my score. Baker was 17 for 32 for 167 yards. Like, how many touchdowns does Baker Mayfield score against the Texans with that stat line?
I can't. So here's what I'll say to that. Divisional games are not a good bar setter for expectations, because they can go any and every which way. For all we know, Michael Penix isn't that good, and the Falcons will come out against a team that's not in their division and play absolutely horrible. For all we know, the Buccaneers looked really good against the Falcons, but they'll come into Houston and get crushed. Like, there's any number of ways it could go, but I'm not looking too closely at what they did as an indicator of what we can expect to see. Well, the Falcons defense is nowhere near as good as ours. I have a certain respect for the divisional matchups that makes it hard for me to view it that way. But I see your point. I mean, and the Falcons I thought the Falcons played a lot better than a lot of people would have thought. And I think that Penix looked really good. But I'm just not fully sold on. I need to see how these teams play outside of their division before I go making judgment calls on that. But
I mean, for me, I'm not making any bones about the divisional thing. I'm just saying, like, if everything is equal and Tampa's on the road, like they were on the road, and you're going to go into a hostile primetime environment and face a tougher defense that, I think is going to be a little pissed off. I think they're going to have a little chip on their shoulder. I imagine the Texans are going to be flying around all over that field on Monday night. I'll be interested to see if Tampa can move the football at all.
I'm here for it. I'd like to see him shut him down. So I'd love to see it play out, but we'll see. We will see. On that note, thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Bullpen. I've been James Roy, and you can find me at James Roy NFL wherever you get your social media. Tom is TC Tom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we are the Bullpen, your favorite Houston Texans podcast, I would hope. So we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. As always, stay classy, Houston. And vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.